It is now recording.
Awesome. And we'll get the copy of that from you at the end so that we can post it for everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Y'all give me just 1 second. I'm going to switch presenters here so I can share my screen with you. Here we go. So you should be seeing a screen that says Learning Spaces. If someone, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, can just give me a shout out in the questions area, yes, if that's what you're seeing before we get started. It's nothing worse than me talking for 5 minutes before someone says, hey, we don't see it. Okay, great. Thank you. Just want to make sure that all of you notice the questions area. This is where you can type in any questions that you may have as we go along. Those pop up on my screen. If I can, when I see it pop up, I'll stop. But if not, we do go through them all at the end. Try and make sure we get all the questions addressed. So if it's something that you don't necessarily need us to answer right then, but you don't want to forget it, go ahead and type it in. And when we get to a good spot, we'll answer those questions as they come through. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Shelly McCollum, and I'm an instructional specialist with Remote Learner. I've been your host for several of these webinars in this series. We're coming up toward the end of the year. I think we have one left maybe before the summer lets out. It's been a fun ride. And I was just told recently by Ron Detter that y'all are about to allow campuses to upgrade to Moodle 3.0 in the near future. So we're going to go through and give you an overview of the new features that are going to be included in 3.0. Now, I know there may be some people out there that are like, didn't we just upgrade? Because you did. But I want to reassure you that there are not as many, actually there really aren't any, large changes, big changes that are going to give you a huge headache. Most of the things that we're going to see in today's presentation are going to be enhancements rather than complete overhauls. It's not like when you went from 2.7 or 2.6 to 2.8 where you had to learn the whole new gradebook. Nothing that's going to be that stressful for you. So I think you're going to be happy with what we talk about today. If not, I am just the messenger. So let's start off. We're going to start off with things that are going to be new for all of your users, regardless of what role they have on your site. And the first thing we're going to look at are some of the improvements to the Addo Toolbar. Now, Addo is the text editor that is actually native to Moodle. This was released in version 2.7. And so that's going to determine the editing buttons that you see across the top of any box where you would typically enter text. Addo became the default for Moodle when they released version 2.7 because it was developed by Moodle developers. And I know when we did our webinar on accessibility, we talked about the Addo Toolbar quite a bit because one of the nice things about it is that it does have built-in accessibility checkers. So it has a built-in screen reader helper and the accessibility checker that would look at what you put in those text areas and tell you if it saw any obvious errors like a missing alternative text for images, or if maybe the color contrast combination was not good for folks who might have some type of visual issue. So we kind of have been encouraging people to switch over to the Addo Toolbar. Now, I want to make sure everybody understands how you can do that. So in your Moodle interface, if you're logged in and you go under your user menu at the top, you have a preferences option. And you have editor preferences over here. And you have the ability to select which text editor you want to use. So in the past, most people set the Tiny MCE editor as their default editor for their site, and so that's probably what many of you are used to. It had a lot of buttons. And then folks switched over to the Addo. Now, if you never switched, you might want to go and check it out and try the Addo editor, especially if maybe you do a lot with math and science equations, because it has a very robust equations editor that's part of it. Okay, you can switch back and forth between editors at any time. So just because you change once doesn't mean you have to use it for a specific amount of time. You could change once for entry of certain area in your course, and then you could change back if you needed some features that weren't in that editor. So it is beneficial if you go and look at both of them and see which one works best for you. But when Addo first came out, there were several complaints about some of the limitations of it. A lot of people were like, well, how come I can't change the color of my text? And Addo was designed specifically to try and help keep things looking nice, so it limited your ability to format things, trying to make sure that all of your content match the theme of your site so it all looked like it went together. One of the things that was missing was that it didn't allow for keyboard hyperlinks. So like you couldn't use your keyboard to add hyperlinks to text. You had to actually click. So that's one of the improvements in the Addo text editor is now if you have the Addo editor as your preferred editor and you're entering text in, you can do Control K on your keyboard to add a hyperlink to text. So you don't have to use your mouse. So they're trying to make it more accessible to all users. Now remember, this is for students or for instructors as well. There are also going to be additional equations in that equation editor that I just mentioned a minute ago. So again, if you're math or science and you do a lot of equations in your courses, might be something you want to go check out. Check out the new equations that they added. And then I think for those of us that spent a lot of time working with tables to try and make our content look nice and neat and pretty, many of us were frustrated with Addo because there weren't a lot of table options. You could put in a table and not really do any styling of the table, but now you do have the option to format your tables using Addo. So for all of you that are in the room that are site administrators, I want to make sure you know that that actually has to be turned on. It's not automatic. So on your Moodle 3 site, you would go under Site Administration. And I apologize, my sandbox, I hadn't opened that menu yet today and it takes a minute. You would go under Plugins. You would go down to your text editors, and under your Addo HTML text editor, you will see a new option called Table Settings. When that comes up, sorry, I think my audio is cutting out. Give me one moment. So when that comes up, you do have the ability to turn on, they're defaulted to be turned off, but to turn on the ability for your users to change their borders on their tables, to change their background color on their tables, and to set the width of their table. Once those have been enabled, then when they go into insert a table, it was previously just this top section that showed up, so all you could do was choose your number of rows and columns, but once those options are enabled, then this appearance section shows up on the bottom and you have the ability to decide some coloring, changing the width, all that kind of stuff. So for those of you that use tables, nice options that have been added to Addo. Now, in the messagings area, this has been something that I wondered about for years and years. You have not previously had the ability to delete messages. And those messages, depending on how your Moodle server is configured, just generally just accumulated storage space over time. And so if it was some little message that you didn't need to keep a record of, wasn't necessarily anything important, it still sat there in your list. And if you went into your messaging area and you looked up a specific contact, you would have to scroll through all of the messages to find what you needed. Well, now you have the ability to delete messages. So if you are in your messaging interface and you're in looking at one of your contacts so that you're looking at actual messages, it doesn't show up until you hover over the message. But if you hover over a specific message, little X shows up off to the right. You can click that and it will delete that specific message. It won't delete the entire thread of messaging, but it will delete that specific message. Now, it will delete it from yours. It may not necessarily delete it from the person who sent it. So just know, while you're cleaning up your screen, it's not retrieving messages or deleting messages from other people's inboxes, okay? It's just helping you better organize your communications and your record of communications on your end. The other thing that's changed, and this is just something you kind of want to generally be aware of, this is not a huge shift in privacy. I know when some people first read about this, they were like, wait a minute, what if I don't want this to show up? So here's what happened. They're making some contact details visible now on the system profile. So what used to happen was that if you were a user and you were in a course, there were technically two different profiles for you. There was your user profile and then there was your course user profile. So if someone was in a course and they looked at the participant list and they clicked your name, it would pull up your course user profile. So other members of that course would be able to see additional information about you, but they had to be inside the course looking at participants in that course, okay? Now, what happens is even if you're not in a course, if you share a course with a participant and you go to their site-wide system profile, because you share a course with them, the same information you used to be able to see from within the course in their course profile will now show up on their system profile for you. Now, if a user does not share any courses, they're still only going to get the limited profile information. But what they're talking about would be the country and town information, and if they supplied an email address, and perhaps if they supplied any other types of contact that they decided to make visible to other people, that would show up. But again, it's only going to show up to people they share a course with, and this is the same information that was previously available to those users within the course profile. So no panicking. You used to be able to do this. You had to change some global permissions to make this happen, and now it's just going to happen by default. Okay. I had a question that came in from Ken asking, students can delete messages from instructors. Yes, the students can delete messages from their instructors when they come back through after they've read them, but it's not going to delete from the instructor's mailbox that the instructor had sent that message. So if you're trying to keep a record of what you sent, then I would definitely say you probably don't want to delete it if that's for, your accountability for you making sure that you've contacted students and need that type of thing. But they do have the ability to delete it from their inbox. But remember, they can't delete it without reading it. It's not like a regular mailbox where they could just check and delete. The way that Moodle messaging works, it comes up on the screen, so they actually have to look at it and hover over it before they delete it. So they really don't have an excuse saying they didn't see it, they accidentally deleted it. They would have to read it. There were also some enhancements that were being made for the mobile app. So if any of your students are accessing your sites through the mobile app, then they're going to have much better interface for activities like choice, chat, survey, if any of you are using the survey. And they are going to be able to, depending on how your site is configured, search through your course catalog and enroll in courses that are enrollable. That used to not be there at all. What used to happen with the app, if you're not familiar with it, was you would enter in your web address, your URL for your Moodle site, and then you would enter in your login credentials, and it would pull up basically only the courses that you were already enrolled in. So now they're going to have the ability to go look at the course catalog if that's visible on your site by default. And if you have any courses that are open enrollment, self-enrollment, they would be able to click on those and enroll through the app as well. So they're trying to make the mobile app better. This isn't a huge concern for a lot of us because if you are using one of the newer themes, which I believe most of your campuses updated when y'all went from 2.6 to 2.8, your theme should be responsive. So your students can still use your Moodle site and get the full site experience through the browser on their mobile app, right? But for those that want to use the mobile app, it is going to help. Now, the one thing you want to keep in mind with the mobile app is the mobile app is really designed to be used with course elements that are part of Moodle core, right? So assignment, quiz, lesson, book, those are going to translate in the mobile app. The problem we have seen is if you have third-party plugins, sometimes those do not jive really well with the mobile app. So things like if you're using Poodle, some of the Poodle stuff may not function correctly through the mobile app, whereas it would function correctly through the browser on their mobile device, right? Because the mobile app's made by Moodle. Those third-party plugins are made by a third party. They don't always code them to function correctly with the app. So when you have all these pieces trying to come together, sometimes it's easiest to take the middleman out. So we don't typically spend a lot of time talking about the mobile app, but wanted to make sure you were aware that if you do have mobile app users, those are now going to be better formatted for use on that. I had another question that came in asking about the deleting of messages. Will deleting a message by a user show in the log to an admin? It should, because Moodle logs basically creation, updating, deletion is one of the actions that it logs. So it should show. I don't think that it would actually show you the content of the message as much as it would show that that user deleted a message, right? Okay, so those are the things that are new for all users. So now let's take a look at some things that, some features that teachers are going to be most interested in. So this is going to be for those that are developing courses or managing courses. One of the first things that makes an awful lot of sense to me when you think about it is that they finally have moved everything related to guest access to the enrollment area of your course settings. So previously, what happened when you were in a course, if you wanted to enable guest access in your course, you had to go into the course, you set up all of your other enrollment methods. Here we go. All of your other enrollment methods were set up under enrollment methods, right? Except you could enable, well, this is 3 O's. You see guest access is here now, but prior to that, everything except guest access was set up under enrollment methods. Guest access used to be set up in your general settings, right? It was this little section, was left over before they had this whole enrollment methods thing. It was this little section, and you had to check to enable guest access, and you could put in the password for guest access. Now they have decided to finally put all enrollment methods, including guest access, together under the general enrollment method screen, and you can go into your guest access area, and those two options that used to be in your course settings are now under guest access. So you can enable it, and you can enable a password for guest access as well, all in one area. The other thing that happened here is your big change in Gradebook, making sure everybody has a moment to groan. It's really tiny change, but if you have any training materials, you might need to update them. So those of you, again, that are site administrators or trainers on your campuses, get ready to go and see if you can just paste over it, right? I just want to edit that, Photoshop it in. They have officially changed the categories and items screen so that it is now just referred to as Gradebook Setup. And you can access it from directly within your course administration menu. So you don't actually have to go into your gradebook first in order to get to the setup screen. You just click Gradebook Setup, and it takes you into what used to be your categories and items screen. Okay. I had a question that just came in about guest access, asking if the default is no, or does that have to be set? The default has to be set at the site level for each site. So a site administrator has the ability to determine if guest access is even allowed to begin with. So that's going to be in their site administration menu under plugins in the Manage Authentication area. You have the ability to decide whether or not you want to have a guest login button on your login screen. Okay. That's down here, guest login button, whether or not you're going to allow it. And then in your courses, you have the ability in your course default settings to determine whether or not you're going to have guest access be defaulted to yes or no. So that's where you would be able to set that up initially. Okay? And then anybody can go in and change it. And you can actually decide whether or not you can lock that one in. So if you don't want to allow guest access at all, then you could just turn it off altogether. Okay, now here's something that's pretty cool in the quiz activity, and I'm not sure if your sites were using some of the interactive question plugins previously, but they were basically extra additional add-ons that you had to put onto your site. You had to load those on your site. And these would be the things like the missing word. You can see an example of the missing word here, where you have sentences and you have drop-down menus that appear in the middle of the sentence, and it's kind of like a matching or a multiple choice, but it's in the middle of the text. That would be missing word. Or any of the drag and drop type questions. So there were actually 3 drag and drop type questions. There was drag and drop to text. So you would basically have a word bank and you would drag your words to blanks that were in a block of text. Okay. And you physically had to drag them with your mouse and drop them. There was also a drag and drop to images, and there were 2 different versions of that. One of them, you had a very specific area that people had to drag and drop. You can see this has very specific boxes that show up, so it's really kind of like a matching question on top of a picture. The other one has a picture that's wide open, and then you might have the same flags, but you don't have little zones that show up for them to give them any clues, and they just have to place them where they think they go. So one to me is more like a visual matching question, and the other one is like a visual essay question, right? It's wide open. So those three types of drag and drop questions and the drop-down menu missing word question have all become part of Moodle Core. So they will no longer require additional plugins on your site. Something to keep in mind with these questions, though, is that for the drag and drop type questions, they are not keyboard accessible. Okay? They weren't keyboard accessible before. They're still not keyboard accessible. It requires some kind of mouse activity in order to be able to grab a hold of the object, drag it where it goes, and release it. The missing word is keyboard accessible. So they should be able to tab through that one and use their down arrows and their enter key to enter those answers in. Okay? If any of you use the close type question, it's basically an embedded answer. There are now going to be subtypes available for that. So you might want to go through and look at those and see if any of those subtypes help you better organize your questions. They don't work any differently. It just organizes them basically in your question bank into these subtypes. And if you use the interactive behavior on a quiz, so, oh, and sorry, somebody's asking, can we hide drag and drop questions from the faculty? So I'm guessing somebody is talking about, like, if you're wanting to basically ensure that they're using question types that are accessible, would you be able just to turn those off? And you know, that's a good question. If you were going to be able to turn it off, it should be in the plugins under question types. You can manage question types. And here you go, you would be able to turn them off right here. You could hide it to make it unavailable. Right? So that way they wouldn't have to, somebody wouldn't inadvertently put something in that made their quiz no longer accessible. Okay? All right. So the last thing we were going to talk about was the interactive behavior. If you're using questions that allow multiple tries for a question, and you have feedback put in for those multiple tries, what normally happens is if a student makes an attempt on that question, the feedback comes up and it tells them, oh, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. And it would say, would you like to try again? Now it's going to tell them how many tries they have left based on how many hints you have set up in that for that question. Okay, so it's going to give them a little message that will tell them how many hints not how many hints, but how many tries they have left. All right, another activity that they've made some changes to, this is probably not the most popular activity, but if any of you are out there using the database, if you have decided to require approval for entries, you're moderating your database entries, when you go into your database, they now have helped you out a little bit because they actually highlight entries that are still waiting for approval, and they come up depending on your theme. I know when I've looked at it in the clean theme, which is, you know, the basic theme that they have, the standard theme, it comes up like that pinkish red color, kind of like you typically see in a assignment grading screen. So those are highlighted for you to approve. And then if you, again, are moderating your entries, your database entries, once you have approved them, you actually have the ability to decide whether or not you want to allow people to edit entries after they have been approved. Okay? So you could turn that off, and then once an entry is approved, no changes can be made to it. You can leave that on. After you've approved it, then they could still go back in and change it to something else, so you better be watchful, right? You now actually have an option for file uploads that you have placed on your course page to display a date that would show either when the file was first uploaded or if any changes have been made since that first upload to that file resource, it would show when it was last modified. This, I think, is going to be very beneficial to people as they use courses over time from semester to semester. It would be an easy way for them to make sure that students felt comfortable that they were looking at the most recent information. So it would also be really good for professional development or any human resources information if you're housing any of that on any of your Moodle sites, to, again, make sure that your faculty has the most current information. And it's just an option in the settings for the file upload under the appearance section. You just check that little box, and then it shows up right here underneath it on the screen. If any of you are using the workshop activity, they have updated the workshop submission report. So basically what happens is when you get into the submission phase of the workshop, typically the first phase, you can go in and look at the submission report, and it is sortable. So you can sort by whether or not it has been submitted or when the submission was last modified. It'll pull up all your people so you can quickly see who hasn't turned anything in for a workshop activity. A couple of other smaller activity changes. Wiki pages can be completely deleted during a course reset. So if you are, again, recycling courses from semester to a semester and you have a wiki activity, and in that wiki activity, students or student groups have to create pages on their own in their wiki, you can actually delete all of the wiki pages during the course reset, or you can delete all but like the first page during, like the home page during the reset, so that you can bring your wiki back to its original state. You also have the ability now, if you use rubrics for grading of assignments, to duplicate the rows in an assignment rubric. Now, I'm a big rubric user, so people are like, what does that mean? When you're creating a rubric, you now have the ability to say, I want to duplicate the row above, and then you can just make minor changes to it. So let's see if I've got one over here. I'm going to go into our advanced grading, and we'll look at this one. So here's my rubric. It has a duplicate icon now, so I can click that, and it will duplicate the row. It will move it down to the very bottom. So something to think about, just when you're doing it so you don't get confused. I duplicated the top one, it moved it down to the bottom, and now I can go in and I can edit each of these. This can actually speed things up if you have similar criterion that are similar to one another, or criterion that maybe are the same point value as one another, something like that. So it's just trying to speed up the creation of these rubrics, help streamline it a little bit. You now actually in the lesson activity have the ability to import essay questions into the lesson. This was absolutely crazy to me, because if you had a question bank in your course and you had essay questions that you had developed for quiz type activities in your question bank, if you exported those essay questions, you had no way to import those essay questions into a lesson activity. So you actually had to like recreate the whole thing. Now you have the ability, if you have an essay question in your question bank, you can actually export that essay question and then import it back into your lesson activity from within the lesson. I'm still waiting for the day where you can share the question bank between lessons and quizzes. And because those modules started out as two completely different modules and the questions don't work quite the same, we're not there yet. But I would just love to have a course question bank and pull those questions in more easily into my lessons as opposed to having to export and import. But at least we can put those essay questions in there now. And then finally for the forums, if you're looking at your forums, you now have a subscriber count displayed for your forums, and that's going to show up in your information screen, like your assignment screen. Excuse me, your administration screen. I had to think of what I was trying to say. So you can come over here and you can show and edit current subscribers. When I'm within a forum, I go to the administration and it will show me, well, I don't have anyone because it's a demo account, but it would tell me how many subscribers there were, and then it would list them. So I could track it across the top, how popular is that forum. Okay. A couple of things in course management that have changed. If you are looking at your list of enrolled users, you now have a couple of additional filtering options. So what are we talking about? We're talking about if you're in your course, you go into your user list and you go to your list of enrolled users. This shows you everyone that's in your course. It shows you the groups that they're involved in. You now have the ability to filter by the last time they access your course, okay, great way to see which students are participating or not, and if they're not in a group. So you can see right here is last access. I can just click on it, and it's going to rearrange everything to tell me, and if I click on it again, it will go the opposite direction from the most recent, right? So I can see who's been in there when. You've always been able to sort by first name, last name, and email address, but now up here, previously you could choose a group, but no group was not an option. So no group is a nice way, especially if you use groups in your course, to see if there are any students in your course that somehow have not been placed in a group yet. Okay, and that one's up there. It's a little different from the last access down here. Just other ways to help you manage your students. You also have the ability now to select an enrollment start. So if you're manually enrolling students into a course, when you go to manually enroll them, I'm going to click Enroll Users, and let's just say I'm going to enroll this person. You have the ability under enrollment options to decide when it starts. So it can either start from right now, this date, this exact time, today, which would just be in general, the mail would, the enrollment message, welcome message would go out the next time messages were sent out by the cron job, or you can enroll them now, but they don't actually get to enroll, or it actually doesn't enroll them until the course start date. So you're kind of pre-enrolling, but not actually enrolling them until the course start date. And then on the course start date would be the day that then the welcome message would go out instead of going out early, which has been a problem in the past. So you can decide now, today, or course start date. Finally, the section editing options are combined into one menu. They're trying to, again, streamline things, make it a little bit more intuitive. What they're talking about now is when you had editing turned on, the different topic sections in your course, you used to have a series of about 4 to 5 icons that came down the side. And now they've collapsed them all into an edit menu, and you can edit your section. And that's not a good section to show you because that's a topic section. Let's get one that actually has. There we go, the ability. So all of these used to just be loose out on the side. They've just condensed them under the edit menu, just like they have all of the edit settings for each module that you add to your course. Okay? Okay. And you can actually create tags for courses now in the course settings screen. So if a teacher wants to make use of taggings in their course, you have the ability to edit tags, and it is suddenly disappearing where that is. I'm trying to remember. Oh, right here in my edit settings. If I go into my edit settings, I have an option for tags right down here. So this is a way to create official tags for my course, but let's remember what tags do. Tags don't actually search through any content in your course. They don't search through material. They are just tags that students could use, and they are tags that people can use to find other users. They're not actually used to find materials. They're used to find users who have similar interests, right? So, but you could add official tags that then if a student was searching for that tag, it would pull up students that had the similar interest, but it would also pull up your course as being for people who share that interest. Does that make sense? So, but it's not like tagging on a blog where people can then search for content based on the tag. It's really allowing them to search users that have similar interests, okay? All right, so that's everything that is really going to be impacting your teachers or your course developers. So now let's look at some of the things that are there for site administrators. Those of you who aren't site administrators, these could still impact you, so you probably want to pay attention, because if these are changes that you're like, oh, please don't change that, you want to let your site administrator know, right? Don't call me, call them. You have now the ability as a site administrator to reset what we call user pages to a default. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the dashboard and profile pages. So if a user goes to their dashboard page, depending on how your site is configured, they may or may not have the ability to add blocks or rearrange the blocks, right? But at the site level, you have the option at the site level to create what we call the default appearance. This is in your appearance menu. You have the default dashboard page and the default profile page, and this is your opportunity as an organization to maybe put a list of upcoming events in a place where all students know they can go and they will always find it. So you add an upcoming events block to the default dashboard page. The problem previously was that if you had users who already existed on your site and you made changes to the default dashboard or the default profile page, if those users had customized their page, if they had moved blocks around, if they had added or hidden blocks that they didn't ever use, and you add something new to the default, that wasn't going to show up for them because they were looking at their personalized version. Now you have the ability, as a site administrator, you can go into the default dashboard page and then you can reset the dashboard for all users. Now that does wipe out any customizations they may have put in place, so I would make sure you give your users a warning that, you know, we've added some new features, we've added some new information blocks, we've added this announcements block to keep you all informed, yada, yada, yada. We're going to be resetting your dashboard, so if you've done any customizations, you may need to redo them if you're going to continue to allow them to customize, right? You do have the ability to turn that off in their permissions where they don't have the ability to customize anything. But that has come in handy for us on our training site because we started using the Ellis system and we were using an Ellis dashboard widget. We wanted everyone to see it, so we had to go and reset the dashboard for all of our users so it would appear for everyone once we added it to the default page. So that is true for the dashboard and the default profile page. A couple of changes for authentication and enrollment. Number one, you now have the ability to allow duplicate email addresses. I want to caution you before you do this. This is probably not something that y'all see a lot of at your level. I'm assuming that most of your students probably have a university-generated email address and they all have their own. But if for some reason you do have to create a second account using the same email address, there is now a checkbox when you create an individual user's account that allows you to allow a duplicate email address. Previously, the only way that you could do this was through bulk uploading of users, but now you can do it when you just add a single user if you like. You also can establish a default site-wide enrollment start date. So I just showed you a second ago how when a teacher manually enrolls someone in their course, they can choose between now, today, or the course start date. You can actually set that for the default as well in your enrollment method screen. So when you get under your plugin and you get into enrollments, that's where you can set that default start date. And then you can also add images for cohorts. So if you're using cohorts in your organization, you can have a little mascot for your cohort if you want. Maybe you have cohorts based on expected year of graduation, or you have cohorts based on campuses, something like that. If you want to associate an image with those cohorts, to make it a little bit easier for you as a site administrator or for teachers to search through those cohorts for enrollment purposes, you can add an image to each cohort's page. And that's just done in the user's cohorts area in your site administration menu. Now, a couple of other things that have changed as far as video is concerned. If you use a lot of video on your site, probably want to know that the YouTube repository is now disabled by default. So if you are currently allowing your users to use the YouTube repository, you have to make sure you go back in and you have to enable it. So what we're talking about is if you go in and let's say I'm going to go into this label area and I'm going to add a video here. I'm going to embed it on my main course page. When I went to browse repositories, YouTube doesn't show up by default anymore. Now they had to do that because YouTube is requiring that you have some configuration with your site, kind of like an API key kind of thing, like Google Drive and Dropbox did. Doesn't cost you anything, but there's additional configuration required to make it work correctly. So when they realized that was happening and they had YouTube enabled by default, some sites had it on and they hadn't taken the time to configure it, and users would get an error. When they would click on YouTube, they would get an error. It wouldn't load it. So now site administrators will need to go into their site administration menu under plugins, repositories, and they're going to want to manage repositories. and they just need to find it. It's still already on the site. They just need to find it, and they need to enable it, and then they need to go into the settings to make sure it's properly configured. Okay, and you can get it's all off of the same Google API key. So if you've already got Google Drive, it's going to be the same Google API key, as long as on Google's API site you have checked YouTube as an option. Okay, so something you might need to check, play with a little bit if you're going to update. And then the other big news is that HTML5 is now the default video player for compatible files. And I myself have already seen a change. Like, I have already seen a difference. We use Kaltura for our training videos, and we had certain players, like player skins, in our Kaltura library that we could not get to embed properly on our 2.9 site, and when we updated to 3.0, suddenly those are all embedding correctly. So definitely this is going to be helpful, since HTML5 is kind of the standard that's out there now for a lot of the video players. So if people are not stealing, but getting embed codes for videos that are out online, and people are giving out embed codes, if that embed code is for an HTML5 player, they may have had issues previously with it showing up correctly on their screen, and this should fix the problem. Your video should actually play a little bit faster now and be compatible with more devices than previously in older versions when we had Flash was the default. And if you had some type of device that didn't support Flash, and we're talking about Apple devices, then you would have issues with people who were trying to watch your videos on their mobile devices. A couple of other admin features. If you happen to use multiple language packs, especially maybe in your setting if you have foreign language teachers who are taking advantage of the multiple language packs in their advanced courses or something like that, just know that you can now uninstall multiple language packs in one step. You used to only be able to install them multiple at a time, but you had to uninstall them one at a time. Now you can select multiple language packs and uninstall them all in one go. That's in the site administration menu under languages. Finally, backup and restore functions have been added to the new logging system. So what does that mean? 2.7, they rolled out a new logging system, and they have continued to improve it through 2.8 and 2.9, and they have slowly been migrating functions over to the new logging system. So up until 3.0, if you were looking for any information on backup and restore, you had to switch over to legacy logs because it was being logged through the legacy system. Now it's part of the standard logging system. So it will show up. Any backup and restore actions that are made on your site will now show up. And then they're going back to that tag management. Now that you can add tags to courses, you also have an enhanced, they like to say, enhanced tag management interface. This is what it looks like at the site administration menu. You go under the tag section in the site administration menu, and you can see basically how many times a tag has been used. You could flag a tag if it's something that you're worried about, that you want to keep a watch on for some reason. You can see when it was last modified. You can see whether or not it's an official tag either at the site level, because you can add official tags at the site level. If it's an official tag at the course level, it would show up there. If it's just a tag that a student made up and put in their interest area, then it won't have a check there. So it's just a nice way of kind of keeping up with the tags. I think they're trying to encourage people to start using the tags more, but quite honestly, I don't think the tags do a heck of a whole lot. Once those tags start being hooked to content, I could see that being much more powerful. So I'm wondering myself if they're getting ready to do that, if they're moving that direction. So they're getting these little management pieces in place first before they start adding tags to other areas of your Moodle site. So that's it. Those are the big highlights. Now, there were over 162 changes, I think, but some of them are so small that it's not anything. I mean, some of them are just to development language and that kind of stuff. But if you are the type of person you really want to see all the new features, you can always go to Moodle.org. Basically, you go to moodle.org/30, which is the version you're looking for, /en English /new_features. And you can also swap that out for any other version. So if your campus isn't going to 3.0 right now, but you're still trying to familiarize yourself with the 2.8 features, you could go look up 2.8 and you'd be able to see all the new features and see if there's anything interesting that you haven't played with yet, all that kind of stuff. Now, 3.1 is coming out supposedly in May, and the rumors going around that I have heard is that that's going to be another long-term support version. So I would expect that there might be more changes in 3.1 than there actually were in 3.0. So we'll see what happens, but we're taking it one step at a time, right? So if you have any other questions and you want to put those in the question area, feel free. I'm looking through right now, and I see there was one about, has the extra credit bug been fixed? When an assignment is added in a course, it sometimes makes it extra credit in the gradebook. I had not heard of that bug, and I have not read anything from 3.0 specifically in the release where that has been fixed. But that'll be something I can look in the tracker and see if, in Moodle Tracker, if I see anything, any updates on an issue that might have been reported on that. Other than that, I haven't heard anything about that. I don't know if anyone else in the group knows any more about that or has experienced that similar problem and figured out what was going on. This is Debbie that's asking this question. Oh, yeah, Amy says they've experienced it too and no solution. Yeah, I didn't see anything about that in the 3.0 documentation, that was one that was been working on, that was one that was worked on. Interesting. And Joe James is telling that they did experience the same bug, and it seemed to be tied to the simple weighted mean of grades. So perhaps you might want to look in your courses where you're seeing that and see if they're using simple weighted mean of grades. And I'm kind of curious how much longer simple weighted mean is going to stick around, simply because you can get the exact same functionality with natural weighting if you configure it properly. So I'm wondering if that's going to be the next one to get phased out, because you know they got rid of some, and then they're phasing out mean of grades with extra credit, I believe, is no longer officially supported. So something to look at. Let's see, has the duplicate option been added to grading guides as well? For marking guides, grading guides? You know, I don't know. Let me look. It's a good question. You would think if they put it in one. He's talking about in advanced grading. She's talking about Yolanda. And I apologize, Yolanda. I used to work with a guy named Travis Yoder. Don't know if you're related to him. He's out here in Texas. But when I saw Yoder, I immediately thought Guy. So let's see. We were in this assignment, and if we go into advanced grading, and we go to marking guide or grading guide, depending on what language pack you're using. Let's see if I add some, where am I here? I don't see a duplicate anywhere on there already. We'll just put something in there and see if I save it, what it does. No. You can still move it or delete it, but there is no duplicate, so it's only rubrics. Melissa is asking, can instructors email students from the gradebook yet? Well, you could always get kind of roundabout there, but I'll show you a different screen that might be useful to you if that's what you're looking at. Let me show you. So if I was in a gradebook, the email address is not a link, right? Because Moodle is always going to default to the Moodle messaging. So you could click on the student's name, and then the email address becomes a link, and you could go through there. Or you could click on the messaging option. Still kind of taking you out of the gradebook. It's leaving you in the course. It's not taking you out of the course anymore, so you can always click back to get to the course. But that's as close as you've gotten right now. I don't know if that is any better than it was for you or not. I don't think that's been a big change in a while. Now, the other thing that I think I've noticed that a lot of teachers don't really use very often that I find very useful is in the reports. If you go to, I believe it's course participation? Yes, this one, I believe. Let's see. Hold on. And you can choose a single assignment. Yes, this is it. Okay. So you go into the course participation reports. Site administration, reports, course participation. Now this one, you have to choose a specific assignment. So this isn't about grades, but if you're trying to, like, people who haven't turned in anything or haven't done anything, don't know if y'all know this is here, but you click on a particular assignment, you want to say you want to look at student actions, right? And you could choose view or post or all actions involved. You click go. It's going to list all of your students. It'll tell you if they've done anything, right? And this one is an assignment. So basically all actions means have they viewed it or have they posted. If I only want to look at post, meaning they've submitted something, then I change that to post and I say go, right? And it's going to tell me post. No, none of these people have. Well, I can select all, or I could select just a few of them, and then down here I could say send them a message from within that screen. So that's a great way to kind of keep up with if there are specific assignments you're trying to help students stay on top of. Maybe it's a major, midterm essay they need to turn into you, and you've got 3 days and you want to give them, hey, don't forget the window closes in 3 days. This is 50% of your grade. You don't want to fail. You could send them a message that way. So that's a quick way to send messages and a mass message as well. But otherwise, no, the email address is not a hyperlink in the gradebook yet. Okay, and somebody sent us a link. There is a Moodle tracker. Not everybody can see this, so I'm going to post it in the chat. Unfortunately, this is a crazy system. Where did it go? If I can find the chat again. Here we go. I'm going to post this in the chat. This is Alice. Thank you, Alice. Sent us a link the tracker number. So if you go to moodletracker.org and you type in that is the tracker that you want to watch, and it says that the extra credit box checked by default when adding an assignment to a single weighted mean category was fixed in 2.8.6 and 2.9. So if that is the case, if you are still seeing Amy and who was the other one that was seeing that? Amy and Debbie, if y'all are still seeing that error pop up, you want to go check your site and see if you are at least running 2.8.6. If not, then you would want to put in a support ticket, have someone put in a support ticket to the support portal to have your site upgraded to that version of 2.8. If you're running 2.8, which I'm assuming you are. You want to make sure it's on 2.8.6. Thank you so much, Alice, for checking for that. Appreciate it. Any other questions out there for anything that we're looking at? And if it's fixed in 2.9, it should be fixed in 3.0. Typically, they don't roll them back, although occasionally they run into an issue where something that was working suddenly quit working again. Normally, that's caught pretty quickly. And 3.0 has been out for a while now, right? They released that in November, so they're actually on 3.0.3 right now. So they've worked out a couple of bugs from the initial release. So those of you that are going to upgrade your campus, you should be fine. Any other questions for me before we call it a day? All right, well, I don't know if Dawn or Kim have anything else for you, but I've enjoyed talking with y'all for the last 50 minutes. If you have any questions, please let us know. Happy to help you out as y'all move into this new version. Like I said, not a lot of big changes, just a lot of little tweaks. Y'all have a good day.